Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here in person. It's been 18 months that I have been actually across the Atlantic. It's always fun to get anything extra from U.S. Embassy, in this case, an NIE waiver to come here. That was fun, but I'm happy that I'm here. Well, I'm going to change gear a little bit about the presentation today. You have been hearing a lot about the science, but since I'm just a poor clinician, I understand less of that. I'll speak more about some of the pragmatic side from the industry perspective, that when we talk about digital approaches, what do we think about it? What are the challenges and what are some of the opportunities? So let's get started there. Well, and once I figure out how to move the slides, there we go. My disclosure, I'm a full-time employee with Boehringer Ingelheim. In case you're wondering what does that mean, it's actually a large pharma based in Germany. If you work in the field of cardiac, metabolic, respiratory field, then you know the name. They are pretty big. And if you're talking about CNS, which is my area, I'm the global head of medicine for CNS and retinal health. Then I often joke about, give me a few years, you will know us soon. Okay, so I'm going to start with a story. So at the very young age of 27 and not so wise, when I finished my residency in psychiatry in India, I jumped straight into my practice. Okay. And what I used to do, and you see the picture on the top, I was working with the elite tertiary psychiatric center where I was establishing my practice. And after 3 or 4 years, I started itching for doing more meaningful work. And I wanted to do more community psychiatry. So what I started doing after working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, every alternate Sunday, I started driving down 100 miles outside New Delhi to a community, to establish a community mental health clinic. In a rural community, there was absolutely no mental health facility. And I quite enjoyed that. The only problem was that means that I had to jump into a very shaky 700-kilogram Japanese Suzuki car to drive on one of the most dangerous roads in the world and barely survived to see those dozens of patients. So after doing this for a few years, 2 hospitals decided to do something. They put mast antennas on the top of the hospital to establish a line of sight internet beam so that I can, and the staff which was in the tertiary hospital, can actually supervise patients in rehabilitation, the community center, while being here. That was a black and white 14-inch screen with a speaker and microphone. That could have been start of what I joke about is the true digital psychiatry in India. Now, why am I telling you about this? Is exactly at the same time, I was also a co-investigator into a global trial. I'm talking about maybe year 2005. This was the time when the clinical record forms were still paper and pen. And the only digital thing you could talk about when the CRS actually used to send a text to the PI saying, I'm arriving, you better be there. Now that was the digital approach at that time. What happened since then, and you see them on your screen, something exploded. And that was the digital revolution which was happening in the background. Look at the curve, how it goes since 2011, and then steeply it goes up. What was happening in the background was this, that the pharma companies and the digital health companies were making this immense network of collaborations, which was going in the background. And it may be very difficult to read, but you will see many names on this one. Some of them have actually spoken today. And from the examples of, I think our first speaker today has spoken about that actually the wearables actually made their appearance into the clinical trial scene much before the smartphone, or not so smart, but smartish phones, started appearing on the scene. So that was happening in the background. And if that was not enough, and I don't have to tell you what happened, because then in 2019, something happened we were not prepared for. And look what happened. Overnight, let's not say overnight, few months, from 11% to 76% stakeholders changed their perspective about how they want to use telehealth, how they want to use digital. And even regulators, which sometimes can be very black and white, actually take some very impressive, flexible dance move around how to allow some of the remote data capturing. I think we have to acknowledge and applaud that. Specifically in CNS, now, which is where I am, it's interesting to also acknowledge that for last 6 or 7 decades, industry sort of sat on the success which they have not done anything to earn. I'm talking about serendipity. They never thought these were the psychiatric drugs that they wanted to discover. Somehow they discovered it, and they just went after milking the cow dry with incremental medicines, another SSRI, another atypical antipsychotic, not exactly creating value. Well, that was the problem, and to fix it, and I think many people in the room knows about, Dr. Onela is a big believer in that, and that is about how NIMH came up with the research domain criteria, something we live and breathe in Boehringer Ingelheim. But there are a lot of challenges when you want to use digital approaches, specifically if you are RDoc inspired. First of all, industry yet doesn't understand RDoc fully. When I said they don't understand, I'm not only talking about the foot soldiers, scientists, and physicians like us, when talking about the top leadership. Also, this requires a different approach. Industry in the past has taken only those decisions at risk, which they think they should take, otherwise there could be money at risk. Now that requires a sort of a shift changing. Another thing which has also happened, that the other stakeholders have to move accordingly. I think one of the speakers spoke earlier about, you can have a nice fancy exploratory tool and you can use it to convert science, but if you stand in front of the regulators and they're still accepting, they are, paper and pencil questionnaires which ask you, how was your mood in last 2 weeks? And that's what, on the basis of that, your new antidepressant approved. Well, I think you have some mountains to climb before you start using smartphone-based, RDoc-based digital endpoints as pivotal measure. But that's a journey. So what happened in industry? Technology started driving its own application. Now, I'm using some of the examples from our own examples, which within Boehringer Ingelheim, I'm sure if you speak to anyone in the big industry, they have similar challenges. First of all was the first bucket is about using technology to address anything operational or tactical. I'll use an example for us, medication adherence in a second. Second was to use technology to gather something more ecologically momentary and valid and reliable and generalizable. So we call them ECMA. We don't call them EMAs, which I have noticed because EMA is also European Medicine Agency for us. So just to be clear what we're talking about. So ECMA, that was the second big bucket. And third was then the desire, how do you use the technology to go beyond, is to address some of these qualitative paper and pencil kind of questionnaires. So let's go and take some of these examples. So the first one, which is an example of using smartphone for addressing an operational challenge of day-to-day. So no surprise in psychiatry, and not just psychiatry, I think this is for any therapeutic area. Patients don't like to take the medication. They sometimes forget. This is also the case specifically for psychiatric medication because they're nasty drugs. You're more likely to forget nasty taking drugs. So no surprise here. So we found out, I think it was already 2017, we'll come to it in a moment. We found out that you can use smartphone-based technology, the power of the camera, to actually see whether patients are taking their medication or not. So we partner with the platform company called AI Cure, our partners, which allow us to do so. Now, that was interesting because straight away we could see that how people have been looking at adherence, which is usually pill count. I give you 100 pills, come back in 2 weeks, tell me how many you have taken, how many left. You may have thrown that down the drain. You don't know. And you sort of believe that is true. If you don't want to do that, another way was to actually stick needle into people very extensively, try to do a PK analysis, but that's not nearly possible. But when we started using this smartphone-based technology, we realized that the behaviors which we all suspected were truly different. People were not taking their medication. So because of that, and I think people spoke about that, it is possible to a fair degree, and this is work in progress, that you can use some of the early data of such technology to even predict what could be the overall trial adherence. That would be a game changer if, of course, you're able to handle issues like estimand about the meaningfulness of the data in real world and specifically how to address the missing data problem in real world. You can continue to use something purely more for operational purposes. For example, in clinical trials, how would you make sure that the people who are just about to not take their medication, they're just about to fall off the curve, you can intervene and gently nudge them. That is something which is an operational issue and something we are actively using in our phase 2 and phase 3 program at the moment with the dashboard, which allows site and us to see whether people are truly taking their medications or not. Second bucket is about, we spoke about another example of using technology to do something more ecologically valid. So And that's interesting because if you have one platform, if you're smart, you can continue building on the same platform so that your patients, and there could be a lot of burden in clinical trials, so you don't want patients to log into hundreds of systems, so you use the same platform. So we added another feature with our partners that you now can use low burden remote assessment, asking questions which are more ecologically valid in their generalized environment. And that is something which we are very excited about, hopefully, supplementing those classical HAMD, MADRS kind of questions. Hopefully that should give us more insight. In some indications, this becomes even more important. Like we have a program going on in phase 2 in borderline personality disorder. And I'm often asked about, because I'm running the same program, my teams are running the same program in MDD, in borderline personality disorder, and about to start post-traumatic stress disorder. And people are often asked the question, why are you running 3 programs in seemingly disparate conditions? And we say, because to us, it's actually all about interest in emotional dysregulation. Somebody was earlier speaking about the use of cortical limbic circuit, amygdala hyperreactivity. I told you we're RDoC based. But the interesting part here would be, if you truly want to measure emotional dysregulation, and you're using tools, which again ask people, how was your mood in a condition which is known for fluctuations of mood? How was your mood in the last 2 weeks? You can't measure emotional dysregulation. So ecological momentary assessment gives you that power, and you have to be smart because this is a 12-week study. If you're going to ask and measure 12 or 13 times a day asking, how's your mood is, tell me more about it for 12 weeks, they're going to throw the smartphone at you. So you burst designs or smart designs have to be utilized here. This usually is a journey. So what started for us in 2017 was a very tactical operational question, as you could see, evolved our confidence about what we can do with the technology. And as you can clearly see, that not only we understood how to add more layers to that, it gives us confidence, it gave us more confidence to go beyond some of the conventional platforms. Because we have been speaking since morning about the power of smartphone and wearables, but we need to speak about 2 more things. The power of smartphone, fundamentally approaching patients in clinical research. And second, power of smartphone to deliver services. I'll use example of each both. So you would have heard a lot about nowadays decentralized clinical trials or remote trials. So, and I joke about that because a couple of years back before my current role, I used to be a clinical program lead. I think Dr. O'Neill knows about that. I had I call it naivety in background, but I thought I was brave enough to throw our drug into first interventional, fully remote trial in major depression. And that's an exciting journey. And again, which I joke about it, so far I have learned along with my team how not to do decentralized trials rather than how to do them. I think we'll do better next time. But this is an interesting experience to see how you can reach out to a patient population, because RCTs are often, sometimes rightly criticized that they're not generalizable, they're too restrictive. So how do you really go out to the patient out there, population out there? So we used, again, this time with a partner, study design. And just to be very clear, you can have more than one kind of model. And that's where I said that we have learned our lesson. We went brave and bold for fully decentralized model, realizing that the funnel looks like this. You can reach out to thousands and thousands of patients, but when you try to apply that funnel to an RCT kind of a study, it becomes like this. So your screen failure rate is amazing. So you have to think that you have to design study for the platform rather than think about your scientific hypothesis and try to fit the platform to this hypothesis. Doesn't work. I know it now. Okay. Hybrid decentralized trial. I think that will be the future. And actually, that's what COVID taught us, more by compulsion, that you suddenly found yourself, trying to convert your standard brick and mortar research studies into more hybrid, so you can not get the missed data. And it's interesting that now when we talk to our sites, they actually come back and say the same thing, that they would love to have a hybrid model for the patients who are under their care, but they would like them to give the flexibility of some time, remote attending the clinical visit, and vice versa for patients who completely want to be remote. But I must say that the technology has evolved, that as we're running that decentralized trial, it is possible to run fully. And when I say fully means everything goes to patient house. They never have to ever see a hospital unless there's a safety issue. So technology has reached there. In that program, we have already also using Dr. Handla's BV because our interest, again, with the technology, this time in a different population, how to do more digital phenotyping and sensing. And I'm sure all of you know this paper. If you're not, then I would highly recommend reading about it, because that's sort of a aspirational, holy grail visual, what we have within Boehringer Ingelheim, that we believe that it's just a matter of time that we should be able to confirm and validate that just like we have human behaviors, which you can see and touch like actual, we have digital surrogates of human behavior and emotion. We are just at the journey to find and validate those. So before I conclude, I should also speak about another power of smartphone and based technology, which is digital therapeutics. So we are also, along with building classical pharmacological products, which we have been doing for more than a century and 40 years, we have started working on our first digital therapeutics in field of schizophrenia. Those who don't understand digital therapeutics, they are more than just apps, because they generate evidence to the level which it satisfies regulatory pathway. So it could be prescribed, it could be put into a health system, so somebody would be ready to pay for it, and it requires almost a phase 1, phase 2, 3 kind of similar approach to generate that kind of evidence. And that's another important issue, because it's not just about using the technology to build something fancy or something nice. It's also accessing addressing the access issue. For example, in borderline personality disorder, where one of our program is, the only thing which seems to work at this moment, because there are no drugs, is dialectical behavior therapy. And in US, the average wait to get access to a therapist who can do DBT is 12 to 18 months. In Europe, even worse. So the power of smartphone-based technology AI to actually deliver proven, robust psychotherapeutic methods in the hand of the patient and solving some of the access issue is important. So to summarize, pharma industry has, of course, shown great adoption of digital tools. Specifically in field of CNS, I think RDoc is a great framework for us to allow to use that. It allows us, and at least aspire us, to get more ecologically valid data. What is important that we, industry has to collaborate more with academia, something which is a very happy and positive trend, which is happening all around at the moment. And finally, only industry and academia will not be enough. We need to bring all the other stakeholders on board, which is regulators, payers, etc., to make sure that you are truly able to make them accessible to people and patients who are waiting. Thank you.